My name is Allison Bennett. I'm 32. If you asked anyone who's known me for more than a coffee how I run my life, I'd tell you. Slow, deliberate, spreadsheets for birthdays, an emergency fund for the things that can't be predicted. That fund was small but proud. One of the few comforts I allowed myself in a decade of balancing freelance work and quiet nights in. It was the kind of money you wire without second guessing when a family needs it. The sort of money you keep so you can act like the person who remembers to answer. When Edward first moved some of his weekends into my apartment, a sleeping bag on the couch, his baseball cap I kept meaning to wash, a chipped mug I bought him for his birthday, I started thinking in plural. Us felt possible. We weren't perfect, but we were the kind of couple that made future plans between dishes. He worked in event planning. He was good with logistics. He was funny about nothing and earnest about the things that mattered to him. He'd show me photographs of his sister Denise, small, quick smiles, a young woman who worked as a dental hygienist 2 hours away. I'd met her once at a backyard barbecue and liked her. So when my phone buzzed in the middle of a Tuesday work meeting and the screen flashed Edward, 3:47 p.m., my chest dropped in a way I can still feel like an imprint. 3 short messages, the kind that tumble out of panic. Emergency. Need $5,000 wired now for my sister's surgery at the hospital. They need payment up front. I can't think. Please. He said, Denise, 26, appendix burst, infection, couldn't wait. He begged. He sent an account number and a reference code with the kind of jittering grammar. Panic always has. Fragments. Caps. Not quite sentences. He said he'd lock his savings soon and pay me back. That he wouldn't ask if it wasn't life or death. My meeting blurred into a film strip of worry. Images of Denise on the couch, Denise clutching her stomach, Denise in an emergency ward lit by fluorescent lights. The moral math was simple. If there is ever a time to empty an emergency fund, it is when a life could depend on it. I excused myself. The office smelled like coffee and printer toner. I logged into my bank and entered the routing numbers. At 4:02 p.m., I watched the transfer confirmation populate the screen. $5,000. Confirmation number 847392. My fingers left a ghost smear on the trackpad. He texted back almost immediately. They took her back. Thank you. I love you. I took a breath that tasted like relief and worry and, absurdly, pride that I could do the right thing. The days that follow had a slow, unbearable pause that I had no name for. Edward disappeared into silence as if he'd been swallowed by the hospital. I sent 3 messages through the night. How is she? And the one reply I got was a voicemail about a lost phone and a tired recovery. The small, ordinary acts of waiting started to unspool inside me. Reheating the same dinner because hunger distracted, checking my texts in the dark, replaying his voice because gratitude and dread sound similar when compressed. A small, bright arrogance convinced me not to call him in fury when the first doubt arrived. That was not my character, not the version of myself who keeps records and receipts. Instead, I opened my phone at lunch the next day to check something I'd been scrolling absent-mindedly for months. Instagram. I ate my sandwich in the office kitchen, the air conditioner humming, and my thumb hovered through a story a friend had reposted. A scene popped up. Bottle service, people cheering, champagne sparklers stabbing the air. And then, in the middle of that glittering madness, Edward. He was rolling his shoulders like he always does when a song hits him right. A hand around a woman I recognized from a photo he'd showed months earlier, Valerie. She laughed with her head thrown back. The clip was geotagged Miami. The post time said roughly 11 hours earlier. That meant it was the same afternoon he texted me about Denise. The dress she wore was the same black dress I'd complimented the week before. My hands began to tremble so badly my sandwich slid to the tile. I watched the video 3 times because the human brain, when faced with impossibility, tries to negotiate with evidence. Maybe it's old footage. Maybe I'm misremembering what he told me. Maybe Denise's situation changed after his message. None of those quiet consolations fit the edges of what I saw. There was the plain emoji he'd once used on a caption, somewhere in his old posts. There were the barely visible tag dates. I could see the glitter of the VIP table reflecting in his watch. Somewhere between the Instagram clip and the taste of bile rising at the back of my throat, a decision happened. I didn't call him. I didn't send him screenshots, didn't rage over the phone. Instead, I opened a browser and typed, clinically, wire fraud police report. I learned a phrase I hadn't needed before, wire fraud, lying to procure money through electronic means. It sounded sterile and serious, and that distance suited the way my outrage had calcified into something else, documentation. The precinct smelled like stale coffee and paper. Detective Harrison, late 40s, kind of perpetually tired, the kind of man who keeps his sympathy in reserve for paper trails rather than drama, listened to me. I gave him my phone, my texts, the confirmation number, the Instagram clip, the geo tag. He made a stack of photocopies, slid a form across the desk, and explained, in a way that was both blunt and oddly kind, how these things could go. Tough to prove intent, he said, but you've got timestamps, you've got a transfer, you've got the social posts. Save everything. Don't contact him. He didn't promise arrests, only a file number and a polite procedural promise to try. On the walk back to my apartment, the city felt wrong in the way that happens when you've been moved to a different chapter against your will. At home, I blocked him on everything, Instagram, Facebook, and left my phone screen dark like a small, private refusal. I filed the screenshots into a folder labeled evidence and sat down at my kitchen table to drink black coffee that tasted like a decision. Betrayal, I discovered, has a sound, less a scream than the quiet cataclysm of a life reordered. That night, I replayed the evidence again in the dark and saved his voicemail about a lost phone to my email. I forwarded everything to Detective Harrison. In a way I didn't yet admit to myself, there was a dark, small satisfaction in the act. Documentation felt like leverage. Not revenge, not yet. Just the cold arithmetic of facts being gathered like stones. There are methods to righteously undoing deception. I intended to learn them. The memory of my phone buzzing on that Tuesday afternoon still felt sharp, like a sting that refused to fade. I remember staring at the screen, the messages from Jason flashing relentlessly. Babe, I need your help ASAP. My sister is in the hospital. Emergency surgery. They need payment up front. $5,000. Please. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. I, Allison Bennett, 32, had been dating Jason for nearly 2 years. We weren't perfect, but the rhythm of our relationship was steady enough that I had begun picturing a future with him. Shared vacations, lazy Sunday mornings, maybe even a house with a garden. He worked in finance, meticulous and seemingly trustworthy. His sister, Naomi, 26, a dental hygienist, lived 2 hours away. I'd met her a handful of times and liked her immediately, polite, kind, and eager to please. The thought that she might be on the verge of a life-threatening surgery sent a sharp jolt through me. I left my conference call mid-sentence, excusing myself under the guise of a sudden technical issue. My fingers shook as I opened my banking app. $5,000 wasn't an insurmountable sum. I had the money tucked away, a small emergency fund, and this felt exactly like the kind of moment it was meant for. He needed me. I had to help. Within minutes, the transfer was complete. Confirmation number 847392. Done. My heart thudded as I read the text he sent back. They just took her in. Thank you. Thank you. I love you so much. I'll call you with updates. The evening passed in a tense blur. I sent a few texts to check in, but received no response. Not unusual, I told myself. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe the hospital restricted phone use. But the next morning, my stomach sank when silence lingered. I called him twice, straight to voicemail. I scrolled through Instagram absent-mindedly while eating breakfast, only to freeze mid-bite. There he was, Jason, laughing, a champagne bottle in his hand, the club lights of Miami flashing behind him. And beside him, unmistakably, was Cassandra, his ex-girlfriend from college, the one he swore he hadn't spoken to in over a year. My hands trembled. The world felt suddenly off-kilter, like a stage had been upended. The same outfit he claimed to have worn at the hospital, the black shirt I complimented a month ago, glowed under the neon lights. His laugh echoed in the video, and I realized, with a cold clarity, the depth of the betrayal. I wanted to scream, to demand explanations, but instead I did the one thing I could control. I documented everything. Screenshots of the Instagram story, the bank transfer, the messages, all meticulously saved. I couldn't trust him, but I could arm myself with evidence. Later that day, I called the police to report wire fraud. I explained the situation to Detective Harrison, a man in his late 40s with a permanently tired expression. He listened, nodding as I laid out the text, the transfer confirmation, and the Instagram evidence. "You're talking about wire fraud," he said. "It's tough to prosecute because intent must be proven, but with this documentation we can start a case." Harrison's words offered a strange mixture of reassurance and dread. I wasn't naive. I knew Jason could spin any story he wanted. But this wasn't just a mistake. It was deliberate, a calculated lie that cost me thousands and fractured the trust I had invested in him. Over the next few days, Jason's attempts to reach me escalated. Voicemails from new numbers, pleading texts, even messages through friends, each one more desperate than the last. One voicemail stood out. "Allison, it's me. My sister's fine. Surgery went well. I'm exhausted. Call me." The audacity of it left me cold. He had lied about an emergency, used my compassion to fund a weekend in Miami with his ex, and now tried to manipulate me into silence. I saved every voicemail, every text, forwarding them to Harrison. Then came the confrontation with his mother, Claire. She arrived at my door, furious, insisting that I drop the police complaint. I opened the intercom. "Claire, my daughter lied, defrauded me, and involved the authorities. I can't just undo that." She cried. She begged. I listened, but I didn't relent. The stakes were higher than anyone's feelings. They were about accountability, about sending a clear message that betrayal and fraud carried consequences. In the quiet that followed, I realized something fundamental. I wouldn't be a victim, silently stewing in heartbreak. I would strategize. I would fight back. Not for revenge in a petty sense, but to reclaim control over the chaos Jason had orchestrated. Every phone call, every threat, every attempted manipulation became ammunition for the eventual reckoning I was planning. The first step had been taken: documentation, police involvement, and firm boundaries. Next, I would ensure the truth came to light and that Jason faced the consequences of his choices. Even as I sat alone in my apartment that night, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, I felt a strange calmness settle over me. I had been blindsided, yes, but I was no longer powerless. Every detail of his betrayal was now mapped, every lie cataloged. I would see this through, not because I wanted vengeance, but because justice demanded it, and because I refused to allow manipulation to define the narrative of my life. The stage was set, and I was ready. The following week felt like living inside a storm. Jason's attempts to contact me only intensified the tension, each message dripping with faux remorse, each voicemail a mask for his audacity. One morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Allison, please, I didn't mean for this to happen. My sister is okay. Just let's talk." I knew instantly it was him, trying to weave a web of guilt and obligation. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to Detective Harrison. Every attempt he made to manipulate or gaslight me became part of the evidence that would eventually dismantle him. As I worked through the meticulous details of documenting his lies, my mind drifted back to the Miami trip. $5,000, wired under the pretense of Naomi's emergency surgery, had funded club reservations, hotel upgrades, and, most infuriating of all, transferred directly to Cassandra. He had used my trust as currencies to indulge himself and his ex, all while spinning a story of urgent medical need. That realization sparked a clarity. The only path forward was precise, calculated, and unflinchingly thorough. I started by mapping out the sequence of his deception. The Tuesday texts, the wire transfer, the Instagram story, and the voicemail. They were all breadcrumbs, each one reinforcing a deliberate plan. Harrison had advised me to document every interaction. I created a digital file, organized chronologically, labeling screenshots, text messages, and voicemails. Each file felt like a weapon, a way to reclaim the narrative that Jason had tried to hijack. Midweek, I received a call from Harrison. "Allison, we've pulled the phone records. Jason called Cassandra from the airport before texting you. His bank records confirm your transfer went to her immediately. Hotel upgrades, club reservations, even a personal transfer to her account. Naomi confirms she had no emergency surgery. This is solid. You're in a strong position." I exhaled, a tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding releasing in that single breath. It was vindicating, but also terrifying. This was no longer about heartbreak. It was a legal battle, a moral reckoning. The days blurred into a mix of phone calls, documentation, and strategic silence. Jason escalated through indirect channels, messages from friends, voicemails claiming misunderstandings, and, disturbingly, his mother's persistent entreaties. Claire's arguments were relentless, her voice a mix of fear and outrage. "You can't do this to him, Allison. He's just a boy. He made a mistake." I pressed the intercom button, steady despite the storm of emotions. "Claire, Jason's actions were deliberate. It's not about mistakes. It's about accountability. Wire fraud is a federal offense, and I won't interfere with that process. The rest is between him and the authorities." She wept. I didn't flinch. Compassion for her concern existed, but it couldn't supersede the need for justice. By the weekend, I had started to feel a shift within myself. The hurt, the betrayal, it no longer consumed me entirely. Instead, I felt a fierce, resolute focus. Each calculated step I took, from filing the police report to preserving every voicemail, every screenshot, was an assertion of my agency. Jason's lies had tried to diminish me, but instead they sharpened my resolve. Then came a development I hadn't anticipated. Cassandra herself contacted me via Instagram, a curt message. "Allison, I don't want any trouble. This was between you and Jason. I had no idea the money came from you. Let's not make this more complicated." Curiously, I didn't reply. I saved the message and forwarded it to Harrison. Every piece of correspondence was ammunition. Every interaction a way to ensure the truth would surface without compromise. Cassandra, intentionally or not, had become an unwitting witness to the deception, and I planned to use that fact in the legal proceedings. Late Sunday night, I sat at my kitchen table, the dim light from the pendant lamp casting elongated shadows across the floor. I reviewed my files again. Texts, voicemails, bank records, flight confirmations. The narrative was airtight. I had transformed my initial shock and anger into methodical preparation. Every detail Jason had assumed would be overlooked was now a testament to his manipulation. And yet, in that quiet, I allowed myself a small, private acknowledgement. I wasn't just fighting for justice. I was fighting for the principle that no one, no matter how charming, persuasive, or desperate, could leverage trust and love as currency for their selfish indulgences. As midnight approached, I drafted a mental checklist of the next moves. Maintain strict non-communication with Jason. Forward every contact attempt to Harrison. Document any attempt at coercion or manipulation. Prepare for potential civil threats. Ensure legal counsel is ready. Strategically plan public narrative if necessary. Truth as the shield. This wasn't vengeance in the petty sense. It was a structured, almost surgical form of retribution. Jason had underestimated me, assumed my compassion would render me passive. But I had learned in these days that anger without control accomplishes nothing. Method, precision, and patience were my allies now. That night, I closed my laptop, leaning back in my chair. A strange calm had settled over me, the storm outside echoing the tempest of my thoughts. I knew the confrontation was far from over, but I also knew I was no longer a passive participant. The next chapter was mine to write. The first legal moves unfolded faster than I expected. Detective Harrison called midweek with news that felt surreal. "Allison, we've built a strong case. Jason's phone records show calls to Cassandra before texting you. His bank records confirm your $5,000 transfer went to her account almost immediately. Naomi confirms she never had an emergency. This is solid evidence of wire fraud." My stomach flipped. The reality of it hit me. Jason's calculated lie, the betrayal, the audacity. It was all finally catching up to him. For the first time since the Miami trip, I felt a sharp taste of vindication. Not gloating, not triumph, but a steady clarity that justice was moving forward. Meanwhile, Jason's attempts to manipulate me reached new levels. I began receiving texts and calls from unknown numbers. One was from Cassandra's friend, another from someone claiming to be his lawyer, each iteration more desperate and insistent. He even tried to send messages through mutual friends, subtly pressuring me to drop the police complaint. I ignored them all. Every interaction was preserved, forwarded to Harrison. Then came Claire again. This time, she appeared with Cassandra in tow, demanding to talk. I didn't answer the intercom, but I listened. "He's just a boy," Claire pleaded. "He made a mistake. Please, Allison, reconsider." Cassandra added, "We didn't want this to escalate. You have to see it from our perspective." Perspective. I allowed a small, cold smile to curl at the corners of my lips. I understood perfectly. I saw the entire pattern. Calculated deceit, manipulation, and now, attempted intimidation. They thought emotional appeals would sway me. Instead, they only strengthened my resolve. I photographed their presence from my door camera and forwarded the footage to Harrison. Every step, every intrusion was recorded. The week spiraled into a series of legal preparations. Harrison requested detailed statements, my organized documentation, and clarification of the timeline. Each day, I felt the narrative shifting, Jason's story unraveling as I maintained a composed, precise record of every betrayal. I even began crafting the strategy for my revenge, not out of pettiness, but as a careful, layered approach to ensure that justice would serve as a deterrent and that Jason could not manipulate outcomes in his favor. By the weekend, the weight of it all pressed on me. Work, legal prep, emotional recovery. It was exhausting, yet empowering. I realized I had changed. The girl who had wired $5,000 without hesitation had transformed into a woman who would not be deceived or weaponized. I had reclaimed control over the situation, turning his lies into documented evidence, his manipulation into undeniable proof. Late Sunday night, I allowed myself a rare moment of reflection. I sipped coffee, staring out at the city lights, imagining the upcoming court hearings, the detailed evidence I had meticulously organized, and the inevitable consequences Jason would face. I felt a strange mixture of fatigue, empowerment, and quiet anticipation. I knew this wasn't over. There would be hearings, interrogations, and perhaps attempts at legal maneuvering from his side. But I also knew something crucial. I was no longer a passive participant. Every move I made was calculated, precise, and deliberate. This was not about revenge. It was about justice, about reclaiming my life, and ensuring that betrayal carried real consequences. The storm was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was steering the ship. Every deceitful message, every lie, every manipulation was now evidence, and I was ready to see the endgame through. Weeks passed, and the slow, deliberate machinery of justice began to take shape. Federal authorities had taken interest in Jason's case, Harrison confirmed. Wire fraud might typically be pursued for larger sums, but the deliberate and manipulative nature of his actions, combined with Naomi's testimony and the meticulously documented evidence I had collected, made this a compelling case. Then came the unexpected twist. Jason filed a civil suit against me. The audacity of it made my blood run cold. He claimed defamation, harassment, and reputational damage, seeking $25,000 in damages. I laughed aloud, a hollow, incredulous sound that echoed through my apartment. He had stolen $5,000 under false pretenses and now attempted to frame me as the aggressor. I contacted my lawyer, Patterson, who immediately reviewed everything I had compiled: texts, voicemails, Instagram evidence, and the police report. He leaned back in his chair, a small smirk of satisfaction on his face. "Allison, this is frivolous. You reported a suspected crime with clear documentation. Defamation requires falsehood, and you've got the truth. This lawsuit, it will collapse." That knowledge gave me a quiet, strategic pleasure. I filed responses, maintained strict boundaries, and let the law take its course. Meanwhile, Harrison and the DA's office continued their investigation. Jason's flight records, phone calls, bank transactions, and Cassandra's cooperation painted a consistent picture of premeditated fraud. Then came the most vindicating moment. The preliminary hearing was scheduled, and every detail I had recorded, the texts, the voicemails, the Instagram posts, the bank transfers, was presented. The judge dismissed Jason's civil suit with prejudice and ordered him to cover my legal fees. The satisfaction wasn't in the money, it was in the undeniable validation of the truth. His attempts to manipulate, intimidate, and gaslight me had crumbled. Cassandra disappeared from the picture entirely, removed from social media, perhaps realizing the gravity of her involvement. Naomi confirmed she had no knowledge of the scheme, adding credibility and weight to the case. Jason faced federal charges, and while the sum of $5,000 seemed small, the deliberate deception and pattern of manipulation ensured consequences. His career, carefully built in finance, was tarnished. The audacity of using personal relationships as leverage for selfish indulgence had been met with the cold, unflinching precision of the law. And me? I felt a calm, quiet closure. The fear, betrayal, and rage that had surged through me during those first chaotic days had transformed into clarity, control, and an unshakable sense of justice. I hadn't just survived a betrayal, I had orchestrated its unraveling with meticulous precision. I had turned shock into strategy, heartbreak into empowerment, and deception into documented truth. Sitting at my kitchen table one night, sipping tea and reviewing the case updates, I felt a weight lift. The storm had passed, and the narrative was mine. I had acted with integrity, patience, and unwavering resolve. Jason's choices, his lies, and his manipulation had led to his own reckoning, and I had ensured it unfolded exactly as it should. The revenge arc I had envisioned wasn't about cruelty, it was about consequence. The law, patience, and precise documentation had done what I could not have done in anger alone. Jason's deception had a price, and justice had been served. I closed my laptop, leaning back and exhaling deeply. The chapter was complete. I had reclaimed my peace, and the knowledge that I had acted decisively and rightly was the sweetest closure of all. The audacity, the lies, the betrayal, they were behind me now. The next chapter of my life would be guided not by deception or manipulation, but by clarity, resilience, and the unwavering truth that integrity always prevails.